Good morning again. My name is Justin. If I haven't met you, I'm one of the pastors here at Christ City. And we're continuing our Life Together series today. Real talk about real community. And if you've been with us for the last few weeks, you know we're trying to ask big, honest questions about community and connection. What does it mean to live well together when the world feels so divided? How do we build trust across difference? How do we raise kids or honor our parents or stay grounded in love when everything around us is pulling us apart? Today, we're going to dive into something that's absolutely foundational to community and to life together, and that is friendship. In Romans 12, our anchor verse for this series, the Apostle Paul wrote, "Though there are many of us, we are one body in Christ, and individually we belong to each other." It's not just a slogan. It's not just a nice spiritual hope. It's a strategy for surviving and flourishing in the world we live in. I want to begin by asking you a question, one that might feel a little vulnerable. When was the last time you felt truly known by a friend? When was the last time you felt truly known by a friend? Maybe it was a conversation that went deeper than small talk, or someone showing up for you in the middle of the night when you needed help, or even a text at just the right time. Last summer when I was on sabbatical, I got to meet up with one of my best friends from high school, and we hadn't seen each other in 20 years, but it was so good to reminisce, to be able to talk about things that had meant so much to us at the time. It was just a very small moment of being seen. Friends can do that. But I'm sure we also know the opposite. We know what it's like to feel lonely in a crowd. We know what it's like to hope for a text that never comes. We know what it's like to wonder if anyone would notice if you didn't show up. Isolation and loneliness are not fun territory, and they can become fertile ground for spiritual stagnation and despair as well. We're already living in a world that whose practices and proclivities are designed to separate and divide. We are not even 5 years on from a global pandemic and a violent insurrection just a mile from here. Now we're living through political upheaval, bombarded by images and videos of genocide and violence and destruction and dead children. We're experiencing a booming economy for billionaires while working people are ground down by rising rents and stagnant wages and unemployment and the constant pressure to just hustle harder to stay afloat. All of this lands on top of our own personal griefs and worries and anxieties and the joys as well, the things that we're trying to celebrate. Personal successes, marriages, kids, home buying, restored relationships, baptisms. All of it, all mixed together, can feel like too much for one person to carry. The good news is you don't have to. You're not supposed to. The writer of Ecclesiastes says, "Two are better than one. If either should fall, one can pick up the other. A 3-ply cord doesn't easily snap." The writer of Ecclesiastes wasn't talking about marriage here, though this passage has often been used at weddings. He was talking about real life, about community, about having people who will lift you up, who will keep you warm, who will stand with you when things are hard. Because as God said in Genesis, it is not good for the human to be alone. And this is why spiritual friendships matter. This is why small groups matter. This is why showing up for each other matters. Because in a world that would rather have us distracted and divided, or numbed out and hustling alone, friendship is an act of holy resistance. We live in a city where we have a lot of acquaintances, but few deep friends. And yet, as Eugene Peterson put it, and I shared this just a few months ago when we talked about our value of interdependence, friendship, he says, is a much underestimated aspect of spirituality. Every bit as significant as prayer and fasting. Like the sacramental use of water and bread and wine, friendship takes what is common in human experience and turns it into something holy. And so today we're going to talk about what it means to be that kind of friend. The kind who shows up, the kind who makes a way, the kind who helps hold up the body of Christ when the world is tearing us down. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, whose book inspired the title of our series, said the goal of all Christian community is to meet one another as bringers of the message of salvation. The goal of all Christian community is to meet one another as bringers of the message of salvation, the message of liberation, the message of the life that God makes possible for all people. Well, to help us this morning, I'm grateful to be joined by Dr. Marisa Franco, who is the author of this book, Platonic, How the Science of Attachment Can Help You Make and Keep Friends. Marisa is a psychologist and professor at the University of Maryland, and her areas of expertise and research are friendship and belonging. She's written about both for publications like Psychology Today, the New York Times, and Vice, and spoken about them at corporations, government agencies, nonprofits, and universities across the country. Marisa and I first met at church, actually, a long time ago, before she was a professor and a published author. And so I was absolutely thrilled when her expertise and availability aligned with our series. And so I want to invite Marisa to come on up, and I want to ask you to welcome her. Yeah.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me today.
So I'm going to have a bunch of questions, and we'll see what we get through today. So one of the premises of the book of Platonic is just that we underestimate the importance of friendship compared to romantic relationships or family ties. Can you tell us a bit more about that? Why do you think that is, and what does it cost us?
Yeah. So there's a historian, Stephanie Kuntz, who talks a lot about this and how basically before marriage was something women really needed to engage in order to access economic resources. And when that was no longer a reality, then what would stop women from kind of pairing up with their friends and spending life with their friends, right? And so part of the ways that the institution of marriage was fortified was to devalue friendship then, and to say, this is where you can find deep community, only in marriage. It's so special. You have this love that you can only access in marriage. You can't access anywhere else. This is the love that will complete you. All other love is trivial. It was like sort of like this norm, or this culture around romantic love. And now as someone who studies friendship, I definitely see that the boundaries between different types of love are not as strong as we thought, right? Like the best marriages are built on the strongest friendships. And also people feel romantic love in their friendships too, where they have friends. You know, if you ask women to talk about their best friends, they'll say things like, I'm obsessed with her, right? She's my person. The things that you might hear when people talk about romantic love. And so understanding that, I'm thinking, how could we have this hierarchy of love when there's not even clear and distinct lines between these different forms of love? Why do we devalue platonic love when, to me, it's this gold under our feet that we see as concrete? We've been kind of socialized to see as concrete.
Yeah. I think that many of us in this context, especially in the church context, have experienced what it looks like when, or seen what marriage looks like when it's become an idol, or become idolized, where even that expectation of singleness as a waiting room, or singleness as a second-class relational status. How have you seen in your research and your interviews, how have you seen sort of folks enact a different reality? Because obviously, like in church, the idea is that it is the new family that takes precedence, and it's not based on marriage relationships or blood ties.
Yeah, so I feel like we're kind of fed this message of singlehood is like, you could be in a partnership, but you're lacking that. And so it's really focused on this deficit model of singlehood. And I think the people that do singlehood best are the ones that see it as, I have opportunity. I have autonomy, I have free time, I have maybe time to invest in different types of relationships because I'm not in this one relationship that's really time intensive. And so when you sort of ask yourself, what's the opportunity of my singlehood? You know, we find in the research, for example, that single people tend to have stronger friendships, they spend more time with their friends, they're helping their neighbors more, they're keeping in touch with their parents more. And so I think instead of thinking of singlehood as I'm lacking a partnership, it is I am having these other opportunities that are of equal value, perhaps, to the value that I would get into a romantic partnership. And honestly, even for single people who want romantic partnership, going into romantic partnership not expecting one person to be your entire community, you're going to be able to develop a lot healthier of a romantic partnership, both for you and for your partner.
That's great. Thank you. Friendship is hard at any stage of life and in any setting. I think some complicating factors in DC is sort of some of the transience of our city and the built-in the natural rhythms of folks uprooting and moving or moving back here. But also whether, and that's true whether you're single or married, but I think also as different life seasons come upon us, becoming married, that can become a focus of our time and our energy. Having kids can become a focus of our time and our energy. And so, and especially for, as we get older, friendships can become harder to maintain or to build. What would you advise in that setting for folks who are feeling that sort of, that grind of, I've spent 10 years building this friendship, and then this person had to move to care for their parents or to, another professional opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, first I would say it hurts and it's hard. I had 1 year living in DC where like 6 of my friends moved away. And so I'm like, why? I have to keep practicing these skills of friendship throughout my entire life. Like for a place like DC compared to like some small town in the Midwest where everybody stays and you don't have to continue this practice of making friends, over and over again. But DC is a place where you do have to continue that practice. And what I see, my brother, he just moved to New York City. So he's calling me. New York is kind of a lonely place. Calling me about his friendship making process, getting discouraged because he's trying to reach out to people. They're not necessarily reciprocating with him. And like the message I try to give him is like, nothing's wrong with you. You're not doing anything wrong. This is part of the process. And I think when it comes to like romantic relationships, people have this understanding that like, yeah, you're gonna have to put yourself out there a whole bunch and get rejected a whole bunch and think it's going somewhere and then it doesn't go somewhere, and you're gonna have to persist and eventually you might find that person where things kind of align. And it's the same way with friendship, right? I think sometimes it can feel hard, and so we're like, oh, let me just give up, rather than knowing, okay, this is the part of process of connection. I can do everything right, but the other person is in the same place as me to be able to connect with me. And there's this term, I feel like I heard in Gen Z, it's main character syndrome, which is assuming that how people respond to you is about you. Like, oh, this person was gonna hang out with me, so they must hate me. Rather than, oh, they're really busy right now, so they're not in a place to make friends. Or like, for me, like if someone lives in Virginia, I'm like, okay, I'm sorry. We cannot move forward. It was not personal about you. It really wasn't, right? And so I think the more that we can deal with like the difficulties and the rejection and not internalize it, because that's what you see, people that stay lonely over time are the people that take rejection to mean something is wrong with me, right? Something is inherently wrong with me, people don't like me. Whereas the people that are lonely and get out of it are the ones that think, this is a situation, this is part of the process, I'm proud of myself for putting myself out there, I still have hope that this will work out eventually, I'm going to continue and I'm going to persist.
Yeah, that's good. One of the things that you write is making friends as an adult requires initiative, which I think is part of that point, but can you unpack a little bit more about why effort and intentionality? We talk about effort and intentionality here as part of our, faith practices and growth in faith, but how would you say that effort and intentionality are so essential to deep friendships?
Yeah, so also this idea in the zeitgeist is that friendship just happens organically. And if I have to try, something's wrong or something's off. And I think part of the reason we have this assumption, there's a sociologist, Rebecca G. Adams, and she says it's because when we were kids, we had some ingredients that allowed for friendship to happen more organically, which is repeated unplanned interaction. We see people every day, potentially, we didn't plan it, like work or school, and shared vulnerability. We're vulnerable, we're being ourselves. So in school, it was like, okay, there was like recess, there was lunch, we were just hanging out, getting to know each other. But as adults, we don't often have that. I mean, like at the workplace, you're seeing people every day, but you're not often really being vulnerable with them. You kind of feel like you might be your work self. And what that means is that if you rely on the same set of assumptions that you used when you were a kid, that friendship is just going to happen for you, you're going to end up lonely. And we see this in the research. People that think friendship just happens based on luck, lonelier 5 years later. Those that think that it happens based on effort, less lonely 5 years later. And so what I try to tell people, because I think the sense of like optimism and possibility and like is so important, is to try to assume that people are going to like you, assume that things are going to go right. This is really hard, but what we see in the research is that when people are told they'll be liked, they become friendlier, warmer, more open. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Whereas when you think people are going to reject you, like, how do you look? You know, you're kind of like this, you're closed off, you're very withdrawn. When you think people are going to reject you, you're actually rejecting people a lot of the times. And this is also something we find in the research. It's called sociality, which is we underestimate how liked we are. When strangers interact and they're asked, how much do you like this other person? They underestimate how liked they are. Every act of connection, we underestimate its value. When I share affection with people, I underestimate just how much it means to them. When I rekindle a relationship, I underestimate just how joyful that is for other people. And so what does that mean, like, practically speaking, I would say? Like, you all are here in the church, right? So you have overcome something called overt avoidance, which is our tendency to not show up at places where we can connect with people because it's scary. But you also have to overcome something called covert avoidance. Covert avoidance is when you show up physically, but you check out mentally. You're on your phone, you're in the corner, you're talking to the one person you already know, right? And so to overcome covert avoidance, you have to say, hi, my name is Marisa. I just want to introduce myself. What did you think of the music this morning? How long have you been here? Like, what's been meaningful about your experience here, right? You really have to put yourself out there and engage and not take this passive approach where you're just waiting for people to come to you.
I've never engaged in covert avoidance ever as an introvert. One of the things that I read in the book that just struck me, you said, in healthy relationships, we desire to fulfill one another's needs, which seems so counter to this American individualistic idea of not needing anyone. On the other extreme, I think in church communities, we often talk about sacrificial love, which may go too far the other way, because friendships also need mutuality. And there's a phrase that you use, communal boundaries, which I see as this way of balancing giving and receiving, sacrifice and boundaries. Can you talk a bit more about communal boundaries and that sort of paradox, that tension?
Yeah, I think when you see a need happening in your community, I think the best way to react to it is a pause. Because if you don't pause, you're going to do the thing that you reflexively do. And for some of us, that can be, oh, I'm too overwhelmed, I can't do it, sorry. Or for others of us, it could be, okay, yes, I'm going to show up for you, right? And the issue with the lack of pause is that we are no longer connected to ourselves. And whether you're able to help someone should also depend on you. What are the resources you have? What are your capabilities in this moment? How much help can you give, right? And the thing about mutuality is it's about considering the other person's needs and yours as equally important, and then what do you do, right? So that might mean if I'm tired at the end of the day and my friend's trying to call me to chat about reality TV, I can be like, no, but if she's trying to call me to tell me that, she found out that her kid is depressed, I might be willing to be a little bit more flexible, right? Because I'm thinking about us as a collective. What is best for the collective in this moment? Sometimes taking care of me, sometimes taking care of you. And what I also think is that there's so much creative in between that we don't access, right? So if a friend is maybe having a birthday party in New York, they want me to come out, and I'm just like, that's just too much. I don't think I can make it, right? There's something in between there, which is, but I do want to take you out to dinner when you're back in DC and celebrate you, right? And so mutuality also asks us, what's the creative in-between of support? If this is too much, if I can't give this level of support, what level of support can I give? Instead of seeing support as something that's black and white, either, I'm completely overwhelmed trying to give, or I'm just like not giving at all because I don't want to be completely overwhelmed. Like, what is the creative in between that I can do to support this connection?
That's great. Yeah. That's really helpful to sort of break out of the binary thinking of I either have energy or I don't have energy for you. It kind of ties into this. I mentioned earlier one of the values that we have as a church is interdependence. And that kind of obviously comes from this idea in Scripture, and even from our verse, Romans 12, where we belong to one another and we work together for the flourishing of the world. From your perspective, sort of even, I feel like there's friendships in the dynamic of interpersonal dynamics, but there's also friendships in the context of communities, of networks of friendships. And so what helps friendships and communities move beyond just kind of sharing life together to sort of, is there anything about purpose beyond a friendship other than sort of fulfilling each other's needs? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, I think of love, and if you've ever read the book All About Love, Bell Hooks, I think she's given me like the greatest idea of like love is to help someone express who they are more deeply in the ways that they live, to help someone become one of the more truest versions of themselves. And that's why I think friendship is so important, because all of us are so incredibly complex. And when we're fed this narrative that it's just one person that can complete you, we reduce our own complexity, because each person brings out a different piece of you, a different side of you, shows you a different piece of your soul. And so I think the more that we can do that for each other, like you said, like friends that make you feel known, conflict you talk about last week, conflict is one of the greatest opportunities for growth, where people give you some feedback on, this is how you can grow. This is maybe how we can find a more authentic way of relating to each other, because we've had these barriers. And so what does it mean for us to show up fully and find a way to sustain this connection, right? And so I think that's, I guess the idea of soulmate is what really I think of as someone who helps you express your soul more deeply. And hopefully that's an entire group of people. Yeah, that's good.
One of the verses that we read earlier from Ecclesiastes is this, it sort of relays this sense of we can't withstand the pressures and the pain of life on our own. And I think, your book would be really helpful and is really helpful in any context, but I think in this particular season of life and the world that we find ourselves in, I think a lot of us feel that right now, that the world feels really heavy and overwhelming. From your research, from your interviews, how do healthy friendships actually help us not just withstand the chaos, but maybe make a difference? Or
yeah, this is a great question. I think we're stuck in this system right now where it may feel like things aren't going your way, or things aren't going as planned, or values that you might have are not being displayed in the entire country. And my therapist actually told me this, and I really think about it a lot. And it's the idea that one system isn't one system, it's many subsystems. And a friendship is a subsystem that can say, even if this is happening generally, it's not happening everywhere. And there's people that are still trying and are still inspired and still showing up for people and still valuing love and still valuing empathy and still wanting the best for a collective, even if that means they have to give up less for themselves. Yeah. And so for me, friendship is that anchor, because I think if I'm just looking at social media, I often feel so alone and so isolated. How is this happening? Is everyone kind of seeing things this way? Experiencing something called, there's this term existential loneliness, which is I am the only one who experiences reality in this way. And I think a lot of us, and existential loneliness predicts mental health and well-being above and beyond traditional loneliness. And a lot of us may be feeling existential loneliness, that, oh my gosh, I don't understand where the country's going compared to what I think is important or what I value. And friendships are the communities where we can heal ourselves from that existential loneliness, and we can say, oh my God, yeah, I think this is wild, and you do too, and thank goodness, right? And I think that is the seeds of resistance. Because when you are alone and you feel like it's just you and nobody else is in it with you or thinks the same way you do, right, that is not a place through which you can engage in activism or resistance. You simply think, I am alone in this, right? Rather than we are a collective that wants to engage in collective action. So I think that is what friendship can do for us. And now that I've been more engaged in activism personally, I see organizing specifically. Activism is making efforts for a cause. Organizing is bringing people into that cause. So organizing is making friends. In a nutshell, that is at the heart of organizing.
Yeah, that's really helpful. We actually have more time than I budgeted for. So I'm going to ask a question, and I want to invite you, if you have questions, we'll probably have time to take 2 or 3 questions. This is a curveball to Marisa because she said that we could riff. So
Totally.
this is riffing. But if you have questions that you can think of, after I ask Marisa this question, we'll have time for a couple questions, I think. So be thinking about that. But the question that I had was the tension between sort of similarity and difference in friendship. Because there's places where we want people who are like us, and then there's places where we grow with folks who are unlike us. How do you and obviously we're facing those tensions of seeking sameness, and then the challenges of stretching over difference. How do you see that playing out in friendships and then in communities as well? I think that's a larger dynamic that maybe we have some control over, but not as much as we might like.
Yeah. So I think sometimes when we think of difference, we might think of differences in identity, for example. But there's just something more core to that. I think sometimes identities, we don't connect across identity because we assume that those identities represent some sort of core difference of values, of which they may or may not. And so in the research world, people that are able to connect across difference engage in something called habitual open-mindedness. Habitual open-mindedness means I look at you and I remind myself, just because I know how you appear doesn't mean I know anything about you, right? Just because I might see your gender or your race or what I think that is, that doesn't mean that I know what you're like emotionally, what you're like as a friend, where you've grown up, who you are, right? And so connecting across difference requires us to remind ourselves and to deeply humanize everyone that we interact with, whether they're part of the groups that we hold or they're not.
That's great, thank you. Anyone want to ask a question? Yeah.
How does insecurity play a role in friendship development and continuation?
I'll just repeat this for
Yes.
the folks who need mics. How does insecurity play a role in friendship development and continuation?
Yes. Oh my gosh, you asked the perfect question because my literal next book I'm writing right now is on the science of security. And I'm going to tell you how I got there. It was this theory that I read called self-verification theory. And self-verification theory is this peculiar finding in the research that we look to interact with people that verify our sense of self. So people with really low self-esteem actually report preferring to interact with people that see them more negatively. Because when you ask them to hang out with someone who sees them so positively, they're like, they don't know who I am, I'm gonna let them down, and I'm just gonna feel anxious. I'm just gonna feel anxious. And it's only a matter of time till they find out that I'm not that great. So even people with low self-esteem, for example, have less intimate marriages with people that see them more positively. All types of really fascinating findings. And so our insecurities, what they do is they lead us to project a story about how others see us that is negative, and that is that they will reject us. And that makes it very hard to receive love and to be aware of what's actually happening in a connection. Because insecurity, where insecurity comes from, right? We might think it's my body, my job, but where insecurity comes from, I think, is our memories. We have memories of being rejected, abused, neglected, right? And memories predict the future. So we think that will happen again. And then any evidence to the contrary is not actually evidence to the contrary. It's fake, it's false. They're trying to manipulate me. I don't actually believe it's true. I don't believe they love me that much. It is so hard. It sounds so easy, but it is so hard to get people to trust that other people love them, right? Yeah. And there's so many ways that manifests, right? If it's, I'm celebrating something, I don't tell anyone about it because I think, they're just gonna see me as gloating rather than trusting they love me and they want to celebrate me, right? We don't ask for support when we need because we don't trust that other people love us. We think we're going to be a burden. And so these are the ways that our insecurities manifest, because what we see from the research is these things that you do to go out of your way to affirm people, to reach out to people, to ask for support, to be vulnerable with them, they actually strengthen and deepen your relationships. But those are all the things your insecurities tell you not to do, because your insecurities tell you that person is just going to reject me or see me as a burden, which is why I try to tell people if you assume people would like you in this situation, how would you navigate it differently? But my next book will go much more into depth. It's way complicated to get to a place where you actually can assume that people are going to like and embrace you. It's deep work that needs to be done.
Thanks.
Would you follow up on that with some examples of how to approach that?
So some asking for some examples of how somebody has broken out of the cycles of insecurity.
The cycles of insecurity, yeah. Have you heard of attachment theory at all? Okay, yeah. I think first awareness, and I will share a little bit about attachment theory for those people that aren't familiar of it. So if you're anxiously attached, you tend to assume everybody's going to abandon you. And so you move really fast in relationships to prevent them from abandoning you. You might put a lot of effort into your connections, but it's not going as planned. Your connections feel really fragile. They feel like they don't last. And when you think other people are going to abandon you, you don't bring up problems. You keep them to yourself. Eventually you blow up or you withdraw completely because you're like, they don't want to hear from me anyway. They don't care about me anyway. Then there's avoidantly attached people. Avoidantly attached people are sort of like very uncomfortable with connection. To them, it means someone is going to harm me. They often feel disgust or repulsion even when people try to get too close to them too quickly. They're not vulnerable. They're not putting a lot of effort into their connection. Their connections don't feel really rewarding to them because from their past they learned if people that get close to me are going to harm me or hurt me. So I have to keep people at a distance, right? And then there's securely attached people who have had sort of a lot of their needs met when they were younger. They assume that people are going to like them. They assume that you could trust people until they find any evidence to the contrary. They're comfortable engaging in these relational acts like vulnerability, showing affection towards other people. And I think that that's the first step. Like if you hear any of these and you're like, oh my gosh, that's me, right? Because that allows you to take a step back from some of your assumptions, right? So is there any evidence that this person is going to harm me? Or is this just something that I'm assuming, right? To take a step back from some of those assumptions and to wonder about them instead of just acting based off of some of your attachment-related fears that, again, are your memories that are predicting the future here.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more. Yeah. Caleb.
How does friendship manifest differently with different genders, or does it?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, so much.
Asking a question about how friendship manifests between different genders, or does it?
Yeah. So I don't know if you all have heard of male loneliness epidemic. I feel like I've seen it all over social media. So what we see is men, if we just focus on men and women, because that's where most of the research is, men are half as affectionate in their friendships on a given week, half as likely to be vulnerable in their friendship as a given week. Even when you look at like where are people's closest friendships, women tend to say women and men tend to say men and women equally. And then we've seen like over the past few decades, for example, women are 4 times as likely to have no friends now compared to 1990, but men are 5 times as likely to have no friends now compared to 1990. And so there are very stark differences across gender that I am seeing in terms of connectedness and feelings of connectedness and like openness and vulnerability and affection. And I'm sure there's many different factors that have contributed to this. One that I find particularly compelling is this idea of homohysteria, which is the fear of being perceived as gay. And this is something that straight men might face. And what that does is it takes any form of intimacy and it assumes that it's going to be perceived as sexual in nature. So I can only be vulnerable with my romantic partner. I can only be affectionate with my romantic partner, right? I don't want to come on too strong with these guys. Like they're going to feel weird about it. And what homohysteria does is it's sort of destroyed intimacy as a part of connection outside of just marital relationships, right? Intimacy should be normalized in friendships too, and platonic connections too, and everyone should be able to be vulnerable because we all really need that. We all need people to confide in. And so that's, what I've seen in terms of like some of the differences that we're seeing between male and female friendships. But I think it's just, as we've seen right now, like what's happening between genders in the zeitgeist, I think it's just really key that everybody is able to access connection. And it's not something that breaks down across gender because every gender needs to feel seen and known and like they can be vulnerable and like they can be loved. Like these are not gender specific needs. These are fundamental human needs.
Yeah, that's really, thank you. I'm gonna, maybe one more question. We have time for one more question. Yes.
Hi. I find sessions like with friends where all we do is talk really difficult, but the only other options that I know of are like going to a restaurant, which can be expensive, or going out to a bar, which I don't find comfortable because I don't drink and usually they're super loud and not great. So what other recommendations do you have to spend time with people outside of just like straight interview style?
Yeah.
So the question was around where and when to spend time with friends, different ways, yeah.
Well, this really reminds me of the last question, because I love like a deep, intimate conversation, but when you're doing it 5 times a week, it's very exhausting. And by the end, I'm just like, I was talking to my friend Frank, and he was like, yeah, like my wife Emily is like, how are you so social? You go out 4 times a week. I can only go out twice. And he's like, that's because we're not talking to each other. We are just sitting next to each other, watching a game, playing video games. It's not exhausting. And so then I was like, I think I maybe need a couple more male friends to just like chill, to just hang out. I would say, I think men tend to do better at just like having activities together, engaging in activities together, playing sports together, watching something together, playing video games together, like whatever kinds of activities that you enjoy doing on your own, can you bring your friendships into them?
Thank you. Can we give it up for Marisa? Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm really grateful to Marisa for being here this morning, for sharing of her expertise and her research, it's one of the things the whole book is wonderful and challenging and helpful and informative. One of the things that you said this morning that stuck with me is that idea of the creative in between, that space where it's really easy for us to default to one thing or another. Either this person likes me or they don't like me. Either I have energy or I don't have energy. Either we're going to be friends or we're not going to be friends. Even attachment styles, right? I think that sense of like, either I am this or I'm stuck as this style. When I think the research shows like we are different styles, we can be different styles with different folks, and as we work on and do the deep work, we can shift from anxious or avoidant to more secure. And I think that space that I mentioned earlier, that idea that it takes intention and effort, it is, like I said, it's not something that's new to us when we talk about faith and we talk about our lives. It's true to life and true to the gospel, and similarly friendships. And there's a way in which we can think about friendships and we're like, well, why are we talking about friendships in church? Well, this is the foundation of community. This is not just, we're not just, I've said it before, church is not just we just happen to be in the same place on a Sunday morning. That's not the hope. That's not the goal. That's not what belonging to each other looks like. And so we risk. We show up. You've taken a risk by showing up this morning. We practice presence. And that's exactly how Jesus loves us. And now it's on us to live it out, not because we need to earn our worth or our value, or because God doesn't love us and we need to show that, make it happen. We began today with this image from Ecclesiastes, that 2 are better than 1, that a 3-fold cord is not easily broken. And Jesus himself calls his disciples friends. He shared meals with them. He prayed with them. He let them see his joy and his pain. And then he said, love one another as I have loved you. And again, this is not just a nice sentiment. This is how we survive and how we flourish. Because we all know the forces that are trying to break us apart. We see them every day. Politics of division, the economics of exploitation, the algorithms that are designed to isolate us from one another and keep us anxious and buying. And culture says keep your head down or stay busy or go it alone. But life together, the kind of friendships we've been talking about today, the kind of community we've been talking about these last few weeks, and we'll finish out in the rest of August, is how we resist. It's how we remember that we belong to God and to one another. It's how we hold on to hope. It's how we might help someone else hold on to hope when the world feels like it's falling apart. And the thing is, as we've heard bits and pieces of, this isn't about waiting for the perfect friend or friendship to show up and fix your loneliness. It's about taking a risk to show up yourself. And so the invitation that I want to extend, which is in the book too, reach out. Take a risk. Take the risk of asking for help. Don't wait until you're at a breaking point. When you ask someone for help, don't assume that you're going to be a burden or a hassle or a trouble. You are inviting them to be the grace of God to you. to be a bringer of salvation to you. So take the risk of asking for help and take the risk of offering help. Check in with someone. Show up, even when it's inconvenient. Choose to be present when the world is telling you to be self-protective and self-contained, because that's how the Spirit of God shows up through us. So ask for help and offer help, and it's both. It's not either or. And that's how we hold together, because the world needs to see communities like this, like ours, communities that refuse to be divided and distracted, communities that are trying to build bridges across lines of difference and across the fractures in our lives, communities that embody, or trying to embody, the love and liberation and joy and justice of Jesus and his kingdom. We need each other. And as we said, in Christ, we belong to each other. So I invite you to pray with me. God, we each came into this space in different states of friendships. Some of us are feeling connected, some of us are feeling lonely and isolated. And it's probably a mix. When we think of certain relationships that have been harder or that are a bit more estranged right now, and hopefully we have others, relationships that are close, that are secure. But God, wherever we are, we ask that you would meet us in those spaces, that your Spirit would comfort us, encourage us, push us where we need to be pushed into that creative in-between, where we need to stretch a little bit, where we need to take a risk, where we need to reach out, whether for help or to offer help. God, give us a sense of what practical next steps you are asking of us in order to build this nebulous idea of building community, but it is a network of friendships, a subsystem of relationships. And so whatever is in our agency to take hold of as an act of grace that you have given to us, help us to know that. God, I pray for anybody here who is feeling lonely or alone and isolated, disconnected, who is looking for connection, who is looking for reliability and stability. God, I pray first and foremost that you would be their rock and their presence. And I pray, God, that you would also raise up others in flesh and blood to be tangible reminders that they are loved and cared for and not alone. So God, all of our lives, all of our relationships, all of our friendships, the ones that we have and the ones that we hope for and the ones that are coming our way, whether we know it or not or like it or not, we commit them all to you. In the name of Jesus, amen.